Hi, so my name is Dr. Craig Poku. I am a failed academic, now turned data scientist. And one of the things that we're going to be talking about is this idea of creativity and the idea of how creativity can allow you to actually release your fullest potential within STEM. So a lot of you may know that outside of data, I bake. And the reason why I bake is because it allows me to basically feel like a sense of belonging. It allows me to basically feel more connected with my identity. But the reality is that not everybody needs to be a baker in order for them to be able to be a creative. And I think what I really want from this panel is for you to be able to understand that no matter what your creative outlet is, it will allow you to feel more in touch with STEM. So with that in mind, I would like to welcome our excellent panel, Olukemi Oloyede, Luís Costa da Silva, and Alex Holmes. So please come to the stage. No, just sit wherever you want. Firstly, welcome. How are you all doing?
Yeah, doing okay, thank you. I'm a bit tired, so let me just shake that off right now. But yeah, I'm doing great.
Mm-hmm. And yourselves?
Oh, yeah, I'm doing really good, thank you. Yeah. How are you doing, Craig?
I'm very well, thank you. So, whilst you've got the mic, could you all give a 2-minute introduction about yourselves and your creative outlets, I guess?
Yeah, so I'm Alex Holmes. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a bisexual. So I very, very recently just submitted my PhD thesis all about biophysics and biochemistry. Thank you. Some supporters in the background. But this was all about proteins and how they move in the body and how different environments affect them. But when I wasn't in the lab or in the computer room and writing, I did an awful lot of pottery. So I do a mixture of wheel throwing, like you might have seen in Ghost, where it's spinning around in the center. I haven't actually seen Ghosts, but I've been told it's in there. And also hand building, where you kind of roll out slabs of clay and build it back up together like a jigsaw. So slightly more kind of older techniques in pottery. Yeah.
Hi everyone, I am Dr. Luís Costa da Silva. I am also a failed academic. I did escape, that's how I usually phrase it. So my background is in psychology and mental health. I did my PhD on measuring maladaptive personality in the context of romantic relationships. And then I did some years of research around children and young people's mental health, in particular measuring outcomes for mental health in the context of the NHS. And now I work as a data analyst, similarly to Craig, but in the context of healthcare policy. So I'm still doing work on behalf of the NHS, which I find really rewarding. When I'm not doing any of these things, I am a poet, and I've been publishing over the past year, mainly in particular in queer publications and literary magazines, and it's something I really enjoy doing. And I think that kind of sums it up, really.
Hi, my name is Kemi. My pronouns are they, them. I am not a failed academic just yet. Currently in second year PhD, only just about. My background is in analytical chemistry, but I'm now doing a PhD in clinical medicine research, which is crazy right now. 2 years ago, I started doing digital art. Basically, long story short, I was let go of my job as a scientist in 2020, was jobless, unemployed, started doing digital art, on social media. People started asking me, oh, do you do commissions? I was like, what are commissions? Started making money off my art, and I'm still making money off my art 2 years later. So yeah, I would say I'm a digital artist, even though I do traditional art as well, and I've been working with a lot of different companies as well, like TikTok, BBC, Channel 4, all that good stuff. So yeah, that is me.
Awesome. So we've got a digital artist, a poet, and a potter, and a baker, and today we are representing all of creativity in a nutshell. So I guess my very first question to the whole panel is, what drew you to that particular creative outlet? So Kemi, given that you've got the mic, you may as well start.
Yeah, wow. It's interesting because, well, before I even started to do a science degree, I actually went to art school, ended up doing a foundation diploma in art and design. Ended up thinking that I wasn't that great at it, and then dropped out and then went into chemistry. So I already had a bit of background in like the more traditional mediums, so painting and sketching, doing like more charcoal-based work. So when it came to now doing digital art, that was more of a thing of exploration, I think, in 2020, because I was like, well, I have so much time right now. I'm at home. I just moved back to London because I was previously living in Milton Keynes. So I was like, what better time than this to actually try something out that's new? And so I just bought a tablet off of Amazon, a graphics tablet, and started practicing over and over. And I guess I just fell in love with the convenience of it, but also how a lot of it also is like, it sort of overlaps with graphic design, and there's so much you can do with digital art. It's so broad. Even just calling myself a digital artist is like very broad. So yeah, it just gave me a lot of like, just a lot to play around with, I guess. So yeah.
Nice. And how about you, Luís?
I've always been really creative, I think, since I was a kid. Like, I played the piano, and I've always been really attracted to like art form in general. With poetry, I think it's something that I've also been doing for a long time, and actually ties in really well with the previous topic. It was not until I found a poetry community online that I started putting myself out there a bit more, and I made friends, and they were like, oh, you should probably, try and publish and see where these things can go. And from there on, it just kind of escalated. And for me, poetry allows me to, I guess, counteract a bit of the rigidity of my day job, which is very numerical, very analytical, and poetry is, completely free as an art form. Is, I think, the most free you can get, really. So it allows me to play with that freedom, but also it allows me to explore things that I want to, as part of, I don't know, emotional processes of my own. It allows me to be vulnerable, allows me to be in touch with my feelings and to share them with others, which is something I think we all struggle to do a little bit these days, and I think men in particular struggle to do that a little bit. So I guess it works out really well for me to have that kind of outlet.
I'm about to bring up the side of people that were never creative. Yeah, never really saw myself as a creative person, never would have really seen myself doing a panel on creativity in STEM. But I got into pottery. I think it was one of the first times that like the Instagram algorithm really worked for me. I got all of these really nice, satisfying videos of people making pots, and I was like, oh yeah, I wonder if there's anywhere in Leeds that I could do that. So just did like a day course and absolutely loved it, signed up for a couple more courses, got a membership. But I think the thing that like really stood out to me for why I enjoyed it, in contrast to like the research I was doing, is that I was doing something with my hands. I was actually making something. A lot of the time I'd finish my computational work and I'd have fixed a bug for the last like 3 hours and I'd have nothing really to show for it. Or I just spent an entire day in the lab and at the end I have like 50 microliters of clear liquid and I'd be like, okay, great. Like I don't really feel like satisfaction from this. Whereas getting to the end of it and being like, oh, this is a mug that I can use for my coffee, or this is a bowl to have my cereal out of. That was such a nice feeling of, oh no, actually I've achieved something. I have a physical object there that I spent time on. I think that was what really drew me to it and then complemented the rest of the work I was doing. Yeah.
So, fun fact, despite the fact that both me and Alex went to Leeds and did PhDs in science subjects, it was only because we went to the pottery studio together, that's how we actually became friends. And I like to bring this up because obviously, like in a lot of our chats, we speak about that intersection between science and creativity, and actually that the line is a lot less rigid than everybody makes it out to be. So a question for you specifically is more, how did you find pottery be very integral in the way that you ended up approaching science?
That's a really, really good question. I think because a lot of my work was around like the 3D space that proteins are in and having to visualize things in 3D and how they move. That was then something that, because the pottery is a 3D object, you can think about how the way things are moving, the way things link together, where a center of gravity is in an object, things like that. And I think I found there are quite a lot of overlaps, even though I wasn't expecting it. Like, you have to do a lot of project management in pottery. You have to make sure the clay is like the right amount of wet, the right amount of dry, the right like rigidity. and you have to leave things for weeks or come back to them at certain points. And it was exactly the same in science. I realized, oh, okay, well, I can't do that yet because I haven't prepared this, or I can prepare this, and I know that can sit in the freezer for however long until I need it. So I found a lot of overlap there, which I found really useful. And also just getting to go to a space that wasn't the lab or the office or my home and work there on something with other people also working on it, but from different backgrounds. I found that mirrored a lab environment quite nicely, but without the pressure of actually getting results. I can just bin it at the end and be like, we'll recycle that clay, it doesn't matter. So I think that's where I found like the fusion between them.
Oh, definitely. I think it's one of those things where, like, if you have a pottery studio near you, you should really check it out.
Do.
And definitely being slightly biased on that front. And I think one of the things I really wanted to draw from that is the fact that you are in a space that isn't the lab, and I think it's something that I would really promote, like, so much. So, like, following that, you, Luís, obviously we're both in data in different respects, and I think that when we think about data, or when people think about numerical subjects, there's this very, you have to do this process, you have to do that process. But I would argue, actually, that you being a poet probably actually makes you a better data analyst. So I guess what I really am interested in is, how have you found you being able to express your creativity through poetry feed into the work that you do at the moment as a data analyst?
I think two really important things. The first one is both of these subjects kind of require you to be parsimonious. So if you are trying to do a write-up of your data analysis, you need it to be, concise, and you need it to be powerful in a way. And the other thing is impactful. So say you're writing a poem and you want to use very powerful imagery to describe or convey a feeling or emotion. You kind of use a similar process when you're doing your write-up. You will pick a chart over another, or you pick a way of representing your analysis, or you depicting your data in a powerful, impactful way, and you do the same thing with your poetry. And another thing is, in the write-up, you also have to play around with, the order, the narrative, which is something that I do in my poems as well, to achieve that maximum impact of what I'm trying to convey. And that's something that kind of feeds into my analytical work as well. So if I'm doing a piece of analysis that I'm writing, and particularly in my context, which is for policy and influencing and lobbying, it needs to convey a message that is powerful and impactful, and it's going to convince someone with the power of evidence. And in a similar way, I do that in my poems. So they're actually really, I think there's a strong connection between the two, which you wouldn't necessarily think about when you think, oh, data analysis and poetry, they seem so diametrically opposed. But actually, I would argue there's a lot of convergence there.
So one thing I actually really love about what you just said there is this idea of storytelling and the power of storytelling, which is something that when people think about storytelling, they go, oh, it's once upon a time I walked down the street and, in fact, let me know if I finish that sentence. And the fact of the matter is that you need the idea of storytelling, the idea of visualization. So, like, could you give us some examples of where you've actually found people have gravitated to your work because of that?
Do you mean the poetic work or the analytical work?
The analytical work.
I've heard from people that I am very good at doing that storytelling, and that I build a narrative in, say, when I'm writing, say, a briefing, or I'm writing a piece of analysis, that I try to structure things in a way that makes sense for the reader, but also that at the end will tell them what I want them to know, whilst remaining objective. So I would say that probably choosing certain aspects of data visualization in between more classical, written up data analysis, I think that's where the poetry power comes through, where I build kind of like a weave through the story that I want to tell.
Awesome, thank you. And to you, Kemi, now, I obviously came by your work through Creatives in STEM originally, and then you've done some commissions for myself and for my mother, which, if you do want crochet, go to Annie Crafts GB. But I think for what I'm really interested in is that when it came to writing up your PhD application, we spoke about your creativity, and we spoke about the power of the work that you do as a digital artist in a subject as environmental toxicology. So I guess for me, it was like, how much value have you found the academy has gained from you being a creative?
Oh, goodness. First off, I think for me personally, being able to use digital art or just express myself using art has definitely helped me both personally and academically. I feel that, I mean, as you already know, I have ADHD, so sometimes my attention is, either hyper-focused or it's just scattered.
The struggle is real.
The struggle is so real. But for me, because I'm such a visual learner, I feel as though visual art has helped me to basically try and visualize certain ideas, certain concepts. It's something that has, helped me throughout my entire academic career. And, when I was speaking to you about the application as well, I think one thing that I mentioned was I didn't know if mentioning my interest in art or, drawing or whatever would impact my application and if that was going to make me seen as less of a scientist or not. It was something that I wasn't sure about. But I definitely say that, especially in my research group, it's been very well received. When I talked in my PhD interview about it as well, my supervisor was incredibly supportive. In fact, he even encouraged that PhD students have hobbies because, as you probably already know, a lot of PhD students some of them don't really have hobbies, or they make their PhD project their entire life. So it is important to have hobbies as well outside of that. But yeah, I mean, it's been really greatly received. I was a bit hesitant to show them. I think I showed my supervisor a couple of months ago this cover I did for analytical chemistry. It was for the Pride Month issue last year. And I remember I showed it to him 2 months ago, and I was like, oh, by the way, I just did this little thing for ACS, blah, blah, blah. It was like, wait, what? You did that? Why were you hiding this from me? He was literally just going to everybody, look what everybody, look what Kemi's done, blah, blah, blah. Did you know we have an artist in our midst? What? I was so, I did not know that it would be well received, because I think when I first started my PhD, it was very much in a serious environment, just after the pandemic. So I didn't know that such a thing would be, interesting to people. But I think I'm really fortunate to be part of a group that really encourages, especially in terms of science communication as well, being able to use your skills and talents and use art as a way to communicate science, because, as you know, there's so many different ways to perceive and communicate it.
Exactly. And I think that one thing that resonates with all three of you is the idea of bringing your whole self to everything that you do. So when I applied for my undisclosed company earlier this year, I actually spoke to them about the fact that I do commission work. I had Tesco's earlier this year. I do other bits and bobs. And I said to them that I don't want to stop those aspects because it allows me to feel like my whole self. And actually, one of the things that I would really recommend to everybody in the audience is trying to find that sense of belonging, finding that sense of community, because with one person, they may go, oh, you're focusing too much on your creative outlets. But actually, you need those creative outlets in order for you to be able to fully engage in STEM. The reality is, though, is that even though Molly May does claim that we have 24 hours and therefore we need to use every minute, we're all kind of constrained on time. So I think if there was one key thing that you could give to the audience about time management, because obviously we talk about time management and creativity in STEM, that's the purpose of this panel, what would that message be from all of you?
Oh, God. Time management and me are not friends. I'm going to just tell you that for free. To be honest with you, in regards to time management, it's still quite a journey, to be honest with you. It's still quite a journey. I think I've had a lot of help through counselling as well. Making use of the disability advisory service at my uni as well, talking with that, being openly honest with my supervisor about time management. All of those things, I think, over time have helped me to be better at using my time more efficiently. I'd also say having an accountability body has helped me a lot. Community, just like Nusat has mentioned very eloquently in her presentation, is quite important. I think I'm very fortunate to have a lot of neurodivergent friends like myself who also, struggle with time management and focus and such. So we all try and support each other as well. So I think in that sense, that's also quite good. But yeah, I think I'm still gonna say that I'm not entirely great at time management, but it's still something that I'm working on. I still plan to work on, and I guess it's something that I'm gonna try and work on, throughout this PhD. So
Yeah, nice.
I think when it comes to time management, one thing that I find that for me it's really important is not to dismiss this activity. So because it's something that you do for yourself, or at least I do this mostly for myself, it's very easily dismissed thinking, oh, actually tonight I'm going to, I don't know, do my chores, or I'm going to run errands, or I'm going to meet friends. So actually put it on your calendar and say, this is for me, my writing time. And if someone texts you, say, oh, do you want to go get dinner? You say, actually, I'm busy, because you are busy. You are busy doing something for yourself. And I find that that's something we sometimes struggle because we think of these moments where we, I don't know, are at home or in a studio doing something for ourselves as like the spendable time we can just use to do something else that is more valuable or more valued even. So that's, I guess, my main advice. Because once you do it, then you'll get all the benefits from it. You'll feel better, and if your creative outlet is also like an emotional outlet, then you'll feel your well-being will increase as well. But yeah, that's, I think, my top tip is actually put it on your calendar. I have a color-coded system in my calendar because, of course, I do. And, that ties into a spreadsheet. Because of course I do, and yeah, I have a night, at least one night of the week that I save specifically for writing. And sometimes I actually don't write a lot. I'm I don't know, scrolling through Twitter, or I don't know, inspiring myself. But that time is there, and if I want to write, and some nights I'll write like 5 poems, or one night I won't write anything at all, or I just go through like a loophole of editing. But at least I made the time for that to happen, and then. Accountability is the other thing I want to briefly stress, like from your community. It's so important. People will not, at least I can speak for all communities, but like in the poetry community, no one's going to point your fingers like, have you been writing? Like, it is not a PhD. But people will want to read your stuff, and people will encourage you to write more. It's like, what have you been doing? What have you been publishing? What are you writing about? Like, what are your ideas? And that kind of stimulates creativity, and we kind of all pull each other up. So yeah, community and color-coded calendars.
This is also a vote for colour-coded calendars, actually. I started my PhD being really bad at time management, like genuinely terrible. And I found that made me even more stressed about it. Yeah, which I'm sure you're experiencing too.
Oh, yeah.
And I found the more stressed I got, the more calendars I seemed to have. I had a day to-do list, and then it became a morning to-do list and an afternoon to-do list, and then I had like my year view and my month view and my week view, and then I have like a general project. It was an absolute nightmare. And I found the thing that actually really helped was going to pottery and not doing any of that. I was like, okay, I know I vaguely need to do this, I vaguely need to do this. The second I go into those doors, into the room, I will remember what it is I'm doing, hopefully. I'll look in my little box and see what's half finished and do it. And when I walk away again, I don't have to plan it, I don't have to think about what it is I'm going to do. And not having any accountability to myself in those sessions was really, really useful. Booking in the kind of 3 hours an evening in a week so that I'd actually be there and doing something. But when I was there, not actually worrying about what I was doing. And I think actually what you were saying, Nusat, about going into your dance lessons on a Monday and doing that and actually not forcing yourself to go to it, but having that motivation to go through it. I wish I'd kept that while writing out my thesis. That's one of the things I really regret. So yeah, putting in the time and making sure you actually stick to it, even if you have to motivate yourself like monetarily or whatever it is to do it.
I empathize totally about the whole kind of forcing it into your calendar. So I started making bread because my PhD was going down the gutter in my final year, and I just needed time to just do something that was for me. And even now, I still make it quite important that even if it's just those couple of hours, I may be in the meeting, but I'm still making bread on the side kind of thing. And that's something that I would highly recommend. So we're coming towards the end of this panel, and we're going to leave a few minutes for questions. We have time for questions, right? Plenty of time for questions. Oh, perfect. See, I stayed on time for once. So if there was one key message that you would say to the audience in terms of why you should engage in creativity, what would it be?
One key message is really difficult to get to. But I think it would just be because why not? Like, you don't lose anything from doing it. You're not losing time because you shouldn't be spending your 24 hours a day, as Molly May says, just doing one thing. You don't lose like effort, energy, anything like that. The most that I lose is traveling to a studio and spending some money to actually like have my membership. Like, and the amount of stuff that I gain from it instead is, yeah, I think absolutely worth that. That was a very short message, but we'll move on.
It's a good message.
I wholeheartedly endorse this message, and I would add that on top of being super rewarding, it will make you much better at your day job and at being a scientist by engaging in a creative process, whatever that is. It will bring a different light and a different perspective, and sometimes it just helps by stepping away from what else you are doing, and then you come back with a refreshed view from the skills that you have and learn by doing that creative process, but also by just stepping away and doing something for yourself. And that's something that can be as well an emotional outlet by its own nature of being a creative activity. So yeah, keep doing it. You don't lose anything by doing it. In fact, you gain a whole lot.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point as well. One thing that I did want to mention, which I think was alluded to earlier, is as well that even if you are doing something creatively, you don't necessarily have to be an expert in it. You don't have to be brilliant at it. Honestly, it's fine to flop. It is fine to flop. When I first started doing my digital illustrations, I wasn't great. I just had to keep practicing over and over. If I look at my stuff that I did like 2 years ago now, I just look at it like, woo! There's a lot of progress. But yeah, don't be afraid to flop. It's fine if you're not great at it, just as long as you enjoy it. And, it's fine to make it a hobby, and it's fine to find ways to interlink it as well with your discipline. But as long as you have fun with it, that's all that matters, really. And also, it's fine to find multiple different creative pathways as well. You don't have to stick to one. I have ADHD. I have so many. I too have also wanted to get into pottery as well. Not got around to it, but I will get to it soon. But yeah, honestly, just have fun with it. Do whatever you want.
And I think it's okay to abandon a hobby that you're not enjoying. If you're like, actually, I've tried pottery and I hate it, I'm never doing this again. Or you do 2.5 months of it and you're like, this was great. I never want to see a piece of ceramic ever again. That's absolutely fine too.
Yeah.
Just do it, drop it, move on.
Yeah, so I stopped pottery because I enjoyed it, but it just wasn't vibing with me at that point, and that's okay. In the same way that, despite the fact that I bake, I absolutely hate making cake. And if you ever try to pay me to make a cake, I will not be happy. And I think that's the really key thing there. It's okay to not be perfect. I think that one of the things that we really want to talk about is the idea that you can move away from that aspect of perfectionism. If you saw some of my very early loaves of bread, girl, they were a mess. And it's through that idea of being able to just express yourself and do things that you enjoy, that's the main thing that we really bring forward to the table. So that was not meant to phrase the way it did. But anyways, so we've come to the end. So where can people find you? Because I was going to say certain social media platforms, but we don't know what's going to happen in 24 hours. So where can people find you?
If Twitter is still alive at the end of the day, you can find me at AOM Holmes. If Instagram still seems to be thriving, you can find my pottery account at Alex Ceramics, ALXCERMX. And I'm going to look into Mastodon, but we'll see.
We'll see.
We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
My handle is the same all across platforms to make it easier for everyone. It's Captain Iberia. and you can. I know, I'm so proud of it. So proud. I'm a poet. And you can find a link there to read my poetry if you feel so inclined.
I'm sorry, that is a cool handle. Wow, I love that. Yeah, if you can't, well, you can find me most places in like Hackney or Brixton. I'm out. So, just saying, guys. But yeah, if you do want to find me online, though, you can find me on KXMolo. That's KXMOLO on Twitter for now and Instagram. So yeah. Oh, and KXMolo.com. Yeah. Check out my bags, guys, as well. They're cool, they're cute.
Yeah, please. If support our panel. They sell stuff. I don't know what. So with that in mind, that is the end of the panel, and we are open to questions. So again, thank you ever so much.
Questions?
Thank you for all of your views and opinions on all those sorts of things. It's great to see some people in STEM doing something creative, which leads me on to my question of, I have all the creativity of a grey brick, so I'm curious as to what you guys found your inspirations were that really unlocked what your creativity is.
What should I start? Oh, well, I might as well since I have the mic. To be honest, as someone who is just not great at painting at all, I definitely resonate with that. I think, to be honest with me, maybe part of the reason why I did drop out of art school before I went into sciences was because I didn't feel adequate enough in my skills, and I just kept watching what everybody else was doing as well. Like, I kept feeling very insecure about, my own skills because everyone had a certain, aesthetic, or, they were really good at drawing or painting, and then I felt inadequate after that. But yeah, I think honestly, looking back now, if I just kept with it, if I just not thought about that and been my worst enemy, I think, just practicing over and over probably would have helped. Not caring as well. I think I cared too much as well. Caring too much can definitely hinder you at times. But even if you are crap, so what? If you think it looks good and you're happy with it and you're happy with your craft, then I think it's fine. There's even periods now when I do my work and I think it looks like absolute crap, but I think I've come to a stage now where I know it's crap when I'm overthinking when I keep looking at it and I keep pointing out things about it. I'm being very hypercritical and I'm being hard on myself. And that also resonates in my academic work as well. I feel like when I'm being very picky about things, that's when I'm looking at it too closely. I have to take some time away from it before I can properly think about it as a whole. But yeah, I think not caring about it helps a lot. Being inspired constantly as well helps a lot. I watch a lot of YouTube and stuff and follow people on Discord and stuff. But yeah, I try not to be so harsh on myself about it. I think that's how I deal with it.
This point is really important. We must not be afraid to fail. And I think we don't talk about failure as much as we talk about success because we value success a lot more. But failure is actually an opportunity, not to be poetic, but failure is an opportunity for you to learn something. And sometimes I submit a poem to, say, a magazine, and then I have that post-submission clarity, and it's I realize what's wrong with the poem and why I need to change it. The reason why I got into poetry, I guess it's what you were asking, out of everything else, I guess I have a lot of things to say and I want to make them pretty. So that was kind of it's a very queer thing, a little mood. But you will also need to think that you don't have to find it straight away. You can try a bunch of different things and there'll be something out there for you, and sometimes something really unexpected. So try everything once. I don't know, join a dance class even if you think you can't dance. You will be surprised by the amount of things. Also, community, again, it's really what makes this worthwhile, I think. And you will find strength in that community that will lift you up even if you feel like you're not very good or if you're failing. And it's okay to not be very good for a while. If I go back and read like my first poems, I'm like, oh my god, like what was I thinking? And you will see like, and you will admire yourself for the growth of that activity. So yeah, don't let it scare you. That's my main message, I think.
I think those are all really good messages. I think a super thing that I really liked about pottery was they told you what to do. So there is one main way to make a mug, and a mug is a thing you can make at pottery, and that was great. And if you look back at all the ceramic objects that we found all the way through time, there's one good way to make a jug. There's one good way to make a pot. There is like very key shapes, and once you've done them, you're doing it. That's fine. So I spent probably about half the time I spent doing pottery going, I'm just going to make this thing that people have been making for centuries, millennia, however long, and that's absolutely fine. And the creative bit will hopefully at some point come later, and it has somewhat. But don't be afraid to be like, oh, I'm not doing something different. You can fully just do the same thing as everyone else has been doing it, but you're the one doing it, and that's completely valid.
Any more questions?
So anyone in the audience who wants to answer. So I was thinking about the time management, and I'm also like terrible at it. And I think I wouldn't be wrong in saying that like there are many people like in this society that struggle with time management. Even the fact that we were saying now that we have to book like a slot in the calendar to kind of make space for your hobby, it's kind of, yes, you will be doing your hobby, but then it kind of like makes you stressful. The fact that you have like a slot in your calendar to have your hobby. So I was just thinking, like, is it something that at some point went wrong in this society, or when and what went wrong, or do you think like it's something that like in the whole history has always been like this? So is it really like a problem of this society, or it's it's a very, very philosophical question, but
I know I'm the host, but I actually have the answer to that one. And the short answer is capitalism. And I think the long answer is that the way in which the arts have essentially been stigmatized over the last God knows how many hundreds of years has essentially meant that we now prioritize science over art in every way, shape and form. Like if we look at the way that they've basically been funding like music programs, that's gone down. The way how they demonize, art is just a place where you basically like, just do some painting and that's it. And then when you look at the people who are within the arts, they are usually white, cis, het, straight, rich folk. So I do think that it's society at large, and I think part of the reason for why we wanted to do this panel was because we wanted to essentially I hate the word reclaim, but that's the only way we wanted to kind of do it. It's the idea that you can still be creative within STEM. And in fact, you kind of need that creativity when it comes to trying to address the really challenging questions that we're dealing with in STEM. So yes, I know it's a time management thing, and yes, I'm fully aware that, yes, we're talking about color-coded calendars and stuff, but it's the idea that you don't want to be feeling that in order for you to be able to progress within STEM, that you have to just be doing your PhD or just doing your day job. Carving time out to actually do something that you feel passionate about will actually allow you to feel that you can feed that into your work. So that's sort of like my personal perspective on it, and I wonder if the rest of the panel kind of resonate with that point.
Definitely. I think actually one of the things that came up there was because science is seen as more kind of real, proper adults, whatever it is, like I find it very difficult to take my own creativity seriously. I mean, you'll hear that through all the answers that I've done. I'm like, oh yeah, I just did pottery. But no, like it is a really serious thing. I think sitting next to the two of you and the work you're doing sounds really exciting and interesting. And I take what you're doing seriously, but I don't necessarily take what I'm doing seriously. And I think when you're creating your calendar, you do need to take yourself a little bit seriously and do think about the ways that what you're doing fits in with societal pressures and actually take the things you're doing seriously enough to schedule them in, but seriously enough to also set boundaries around the scheduling, which I'm bad at doing. But yeah.
Yeah, I agree with what people are saying on this. I think it is definitely capitalism's fault, as pretty much everything else. But I think, interestingly, we arrived to this point in time where we see art form or creative outlets as something that is not productive because it's not generating wealth and money. And you can even, I don't know, you can sell your pots, and I can get paid for my poems, and you can get paid for your art. There's obviously a financial achievement you can get, but a lot of the time when we do it for ourselves, and because of that we're inclined to think, because that's how society is structured, that it's actually worthless because you're not getting anything out of it. Actually, you're getting a lot out of it. It's just not financial, but we see everything through a financial lenses because it's just the way that society has been structured, sadly. So I would just advise, just ignore everyone else, just do it. Even if it's not giving you any money, it's giving you a lot more important things than that.
Capitalism is the issue, like everyone said. It's just true. I do think that somewhat, having a busy schedule has always been a sort of thing, but recently, I do notice, in and out of academia, whether my friends as well are, in the sciences and academia, or in the creative field as well, doing production stuff or acting, content creation. I've noticed that everybody has a very hectic schedule at times, and especially for creatives now, I know so many people who are working as accountants or in finance or in science, or in STEM like us, and are still having a creative thing on the side, that they're basically trying to, what's the word? They're trying to finance, so that we can make time to, be able to profit off of our creative, work, as well as just be able to survive and pay rent and, to eat. So everyone, I think, these days has a very busy schedule just because of that. We need to work, and we need to do work that also fuels our soul as well. So that's definitely a thing. I think one thing I will say is that I think a lot of us, we do forget to factor in rest. I think a lot of us, we do, especially if we have 9-to-5 jobs and we go home and we do our more creative work, we just never have the time to rest, it seems. Or at least we're not making the time to do it. So I think, that's the reason why a lot of us are suffering from burnout, and, there's a lot of people who are now, getting a lot depressed, feeling very anxious. But yeah, I think that's something that we do need to, I think it's definitely a generational thing, but we definitely need to bring forth more, more discussions about mental health and rest and well-being, in the future, and now actually.
And I think if they did bring all of these points up for education, I would feel like a more healthy-minded individual, I would say. And I think that one of the things I also wanted to kind of add to that as well was that without creativity, I don't think I would have even accepted my intersecting identities as somebody who's both black and queer. And that had no financial incentive, but it did allow me to then actually bring my whole self to any job that I go to. And I think that's the reason that I'm so pro-creative, and I always encourage everybody here. It doesn't matter how small it is. It doesn't need to be a 2-hour block. It could just be 5 minutes. I'm writing a sassy tweet for whatever reason. But that in itself is a form of creativity, which I would really recommend. Do we have time for one more question?
Yes.
Yeah.
One more question.
Hi. English is, I'm a bit insecure about my English, so please, if you don't understand my question, tell me. So I think we all go through phases of burnouts, or we just feel exhausted or demotivated when it comes to doing our formal jobs, while PhD, sciencing, whatever. Do you find shelter in those creativity hobbies or creativity spaces, or that burnout, that just exhaustion extends to those also creativity activities that you do, no, I'm not doing whatever today. I'm just gonna lie on my bed, watch Netflix. Yeah.
it's funny that you asked this question because this is something that I've been discussing with my creative counterparts recently, and it's something I've actually pondered about a lot recently because now as someone who actually also like finances themselves off of their creative work as well as, you know, getting, you know, money and doing projects, you know, alongside my PhD, you know, I do a lot of things. So basically, even though I'm you know, a digital artist alongside my PhD, I also work for another organization called Black Girls Camping Trip. And, you know, we tend to get funding from them, and, you know, we basically do a whole thing of, you know, trying to provide a mental health retreat for Black women and Black non-binary people. So, and I do a lot of other, like, side hustle stuff and, you know, things like that. But one thing that I have realized is that at the moment, I'm not doing enough creative work, you know, unpaid creative work that actually makes me happy at the moment. And that's something I kept, you know, I've always like said to people, oh, make sure if you're wanting to make money out of your creative endeavors, then at least make sure to remind yourself of why you enjoy doing this in the first place. Because when you do end up doing commissions like I do, for instance, and you're always, you know, doing stuff for other people, oh, do this, do that, you know, you forget, you know, why you actually enjoyed it in the first place. When I started it, it was because I was bored and I was unemployed, I had no money. But yeah, I think we do need to remember as well that you can also burn out from things that you love doing as well. It doesn't matter if, you know, doing creative work and making money off of that, you know, is great, or, you know, enjoy doing that. There are times where you can absolutely hate that and it's fine and it's completely normal. But one thing I think has helped me is just honestly going to places that inspire me. So places like galleries, like I've been to a lot of friends, like exhibitions recently. That's definitely helped me feel more secure in my creativity. I definitely have a big creative friendship group, so they inspire me tons and tons and tons. To be honest, like Craig said, like, and I think I wrote this in my in the article that I did last year for Pride Month. Like, being queer in itself, like, is being so creative. People find you don't necessarily have to be like an illustrator or a painter to be creative. Like, even just being queer, being part of the LGBT plus community is being creative, because so many people find solace and, you know, express themselves in a creative way. Even your existence is creative. It's the way that we've been able to survive and thrive and just like exist in, like, you know, cis heteronormative like spaces. Like, it's just how, you know, we've come to be. So creativity isn't just like doing painting or whatever, or baking, like Craig says. So yeah, but at the same time, it's definitely important, I think, to, you know, it always comes back to community. How funny is that? It always comes back to community.
It's like we planned this.
Yeah, it's good, it's good, yeah. But yeah, surrounding yourself with people, like the internet, being on social media. Twitter helped me a lot during the pandemic. I found so many of my creative peers, so many queer peers, you know, during that time as well. Like, that helps a lot. Even if you are suffering burnout from your creative endeavors, you know, being around people, like seeing stuff, just you know, absorbing, you know, media, reading and stuff can definitely help to reinvigorate you. So, yeah.
Yeah, I really want to echo that. I think it's so important, the community aspect of it. You don't necessarily have to be doing your art form. When it comes to poetry, I can be reading other people's poetry, or I can be talking to another poet, or I can be going to a soiree or a reading or a bookshop and spending a lot of money on books that I will not have time to read. So there's a lot of things that are still related to your passion, your creative outlet, and not necessarily it. So also, this is something you do for yourself, so don't put extra pressure on it. I think that's my main message. So if one night you've scheduled on your color-coded calendar that you're gonna write tonight, and you're like, actually, I'm just gonna read someone else's book, or I'm just gonna talk to my poet friend and I'm gonna discuss his ideas, or you can do something that I do. I just send voice notes to myself with like lines for poems in the middle of the night, and then I go back to them when I'm on one of those evenings when I'm writing. So, you know, just the process and the engagement, that's already a lot. So don't feel like you have to achieve something like straight away, because that puts like a lot of pressure on you, and then you can burn out. Because at the end of the day, this is something that you do outside of your day job, outside of things that are far more demanding, and it should be something that brings you joy. So if it's not bringing you joy, just scale back a little bit. That's just, my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think those are all really good points. I think the only thing that hasn't been said is that there is a reason why when the pandemic started and a lot of people working from home have more kind of free time out of their commutes and things, that they did turn to creative things. They turned to baking. They turned to more artistic things. But it's kind of like putting a plaster over like a really nasty injury. It's nice. You can say, oh, have you tried yoga? And that's, it feels like you're doing something to help. I think you need to recognize when you are burnt out, and actually the best thing to do is just to lie in bed and watch Netflix for hours on end. And like you said, like if it's not sparking joy, scale back, recognize when that is, because as good as creativity is, it's not going to fix everything for you. And sometimes it does feel like you're adding another thing to yourself to be doing. Recognize when you have to just sleep an extra 12 hours or whatever it is, and just to get yourself through something when you need to let things go. Yeah.
Awesome. So with that in mind, we are at the end of the panel. So can I firstly ask the audience to give a massive applause to our panelists? So I was your host, Dr. Craig Poku. You can find me everywhere on Poku Bakes. So that's my creative outlet. And I guess the last thing I would say before we go for lunch is be more creative and don't feel that that creativity is going to hinder you in your scientific careers. So with that in mind, thank you ever so much. So yeah.